Welcome back, podcast friends. I want to start out this podcast by letting you know that we are discussing abuse. If this is something that you will find disturbing, please skip this episode. Now, if you follow along with my blog, you might know that I've been writing a journal of sorts. It's a weekly post where I talk about my life, and I call it a work of fiction as it relates to anyone but me, because it's my recollections and it's my reflections on my life. And the reason why I did it was because it was a journal of sorts for my kids. And lately, I've been about the last 2 months, I've been discussing an abusive marriage that I was in for many years. And because so many people have reached out to me, and either through emails, direct messages, I've even gotten handwritten letters and cards from women, that I wanted to talk with a professional about domestic violence, because I certainly am not one, and clearly made some mistakes along the way. So today, my friend Lori Corrigan, who is a licensed clinical professional counselor and the founder of Foundations for Life Wellness and Counseling and Wellness Center, is with me to talk about this important subject. Welcome, Lori.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for having me here with you today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for being with us. I will leave all the ways that you can contact Lori in the show notes, and it'll also be in my podcast blog post. But let's get started with Lori by defining the different types of abusive relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great place to start. So abuse is defined as a pattern of behavior used by one person to gain and maintain control over another. And I think the key word there is a pattern of behavior. It's not a one-time incident. It's something that you would see happening on many occasions. Usually the abuse starts with psychological or emotional abuse and control, and escalates to physical violence. And there are a number of different types of abuse, and I'll go over them and provide some examples as well. So one type of abuse is physical abuse. So with physical abuse, you would see things like punching, hitting, shoving, kicking, biting, scratching, or hair pulling. With psychological or emotional abuse or verbal abuse, again, not a one-time incident, but a pattern of things that you would see, pattern of behaviors, that maladaptive behaviors that you would see, constant criticism or insults, belittling someone's abilities, constant name calling, damaging a partner's relationship with their children, not letting a partner see friends and family. There are trust issues. There may be jealousy or possessiveness happening. They may try to isolate you from other people, monitor where you go, who you spend time with. They may threaten to hurt themselves. They may threaten to hurt you. They may threaten to hurt family members, friends, or pets. So those would be all examples of emotional or verbal or psychological abuse. Sexual abuse is forcing sexual contact without consent. Financial and economic abuse would be limiting access to financial assets, seeking to exert total control over the couple's finances, withholding money, forbidding their partner to work and earn their own money. And then there's stalking and cyber stalking. So when one party directs harassing or threatening behavior towards the intended target, this behavior is typically repeated to cause fear for their victims. And they may repeatedly attempt to communicate with you, even though it has been expressly communicated that the dialogue and the conversation is not welcome. And they become cyber stalking when the abuser is using technology to stalk their victim, and that is becoming increasingly common. That could be repeated text messages, emails, instant messages, and things like that.
So we basically, when we think about abuse, we think about it with an intimate partner, or a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but it is not limited to that, correct?
Correct, absolutely. So, domestic abuse, domestic violence, it can also be called intimate partner violence, but it occurs in a range of relationships. You don't have to be married, right? So there's marriage, people who are living together, or a dating situation, and anyone can be a victim of domestic violence, regardless of age, race, gender, sexual orientation, education, faith, or class. It could happen to anyone.
Well, and when I was in this situation, I never shared with anybody what was going on. The only person who really knew was my youngest brother, and he was just in college. So I felt like he he was the safest one I could talk to. And the first time I told him was I was in a situation with a very young baby and I needed to go to someone to take me to the hospital. And so can you share with everybody some of the signs of abuse, because people don't always talk about it. So there may be
Yeah,
signs of abuse that people can see or
right.
notice.
Absolutely. And I want to state at the outset that these signs could be indicators of a lot of different things, not necessarily abuse. So, so just kind of keeping in mind, there are many factors that we have to take into consideration. But signs of physical abuse may include someone wearing long sleeves or scarves in hot weather, wearing heavier than normal makeup, or wearing sunglasses while they're inside to kind of conceal the bruising that may occur with physical abuse. Signs of emotional abuse, and there are many, and again, this may or may not indicate, but just things to watch out for. That person may have increased agitation and anxiety. They may have a constant apprehension about things. There might be a change in sleeping habits. Maybe they're sleeping too much. Maybe they're not sleeping enough. They might develop a drug or an alcohol problem. They might come across as extremely apologetic or meek. You may notice a loss of interest in daily activities, low self-esteem, seeming fearful. Their symptoms of depression may come up, and a symptom of depression may be things that someone would normally engage in, they're no longer engaging in. So if you watch for that pattern, talking about attempting suicide. So there's a range of symptoms that you might see. Kind of general signs that may indicate abuse. This person may become more quiet or more withdrawn with friends or family members. They might cancel. Again, things they usually enjoy or consistently attend or participate in, they may no longer, might start to drop out. They might give you last minute reasons why they can't be there. They may start to exhibit excessive privacy regarding their personal life, or with the person that they're in a relationship with. And they may often be late to work or to other appointments.
So if it's not you who's experiencing this, there may be somebody like a friend or a suspect. And like you said, you can't, just because somebody has a bruise, I'm the clumsiest person in the whole world. So
Yeah,
I mean, there's
yeah,
situations, but if you assess the whole thing in its totality and you do think that there's something going on
yeah,
with a friend or a family member, what are some things that you could do to help, or maybe even hurt? I mean, there's a fine line. I know that for a
yeah,
fact.
yeah.
So what are some of the things that if you were wanting to help somebody that you could do?
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to state at the outset, first and foremost, as a therapist, we always talk about if you feel that there's imminent harm, call 911. So if there's any indication that there is imminent or immediate harm, don't take matters into your own hands. Get that person the help that they need, right? And there would have to be some significant indicators there for that to happen. But we always state that at the outset. I think it's so important that you're listening to your people, that you're watching for signs and you're offering support. we want to let people know that they're not alone. We want to let people know that there's help available. We do not want to pry or pressure them to leave if they are not ready to do so, because it can be dangerous for them. And this is, I think, an interesting point to keep in mind. The period after a survivor leaves their abuser can be the most dangerous time in the abuse cycle, especially when physical abuse is occurring. And then also what an important fact to keep in mind is that a survivor often makes several attempts to leave before actually succeeding. And so it's a process, right? And I know that as a friend or a loved one, we have this immediate concern and we want to protect them and we want to get them the help that they need. And it's important that we work with them, but meet them where they're at, support them, ask questions. If someone does confide in you, help them you can do something like help them make a safety plan that includes excuses they can use to actually leave the situation or to leave the home, where they can go, come up with a plan with them for where they can go once they decide to leave, and maybe even helping them or giving them ideas for getting a bag together. So they have essentials. So when they do leave, they can leave quickly and have some things with them that they need. One of the most important things that you can do is provide them, if they're open and welcome to it, is to provide them with resources. There are a lot of professionals out there at the ready 24/7 to help with this situation. So put them in touch with resources to help them stay safe and get them the help that they need, domestic violence shelters, helplines, and support groups. And I know we'll provide our listeners today with those resources.
Absolutely, for sure. As I mentioned before, I didn't tell anybody, and mine was like, I wanted to have this persona of everything was perfect in our family, and I was, and I was ashamed that I was putting up with this, that I was in this situation, that I'd gotten myself in this situation and didn't know how to get out. I never called the police. Is this common for people who are being abused?
Yes, absolutely. Very, very common. Survivors may be very afraid of their abuser. They may fear for their safety. They may be afraid to open up to other people about their experiences, which are very difficult. A lot of times survivors are threatened to keep silent, and for fear of their safety or maybe the safety of their children, their pets, their loved ones, they keep silent. You also talked about a number of other things, Lynn, that I think are also real as well. So it's not just safety, it's negative judgments from other people. It's fear of people not believing them too. And the feelings of shame and embarrassment. I think a lot of survivors believe that they quote unquote should have done more to defend themselves or to get themselves out of that situation. And and so those are all things we have to remind ourselves of, that it might feel like that, but that's not necessarily facts, if that makes sense.
Yes. And I just want to share for everybody, in my personal situation, it was years before I got out of the situation. And I knew that it was not a good thing. I knew that I should be doing life differently, but it was also my experience that there were a lot of apologies, like, this will never happen again, I'm so sorry, and you believe them, and and it becomes a vicious cycle. And there was also a lot of, I wouldn't have been so mad if you didn't do this, like everything was my fault, like, and I know that this is a common scenario.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I saw my young, almost 5-year-old son cowering in a corner watching me be physically abused that I was like, I have to leave because of this little boy. So let's share what the likelihood of that abuse extending to other family members and kids can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to pause and honor what you're doing here, Lynn, just being vulnerable and sharing your story. And it takes a lot to get to where you're at today, and to do the things that you've done to get yourself out of that situation. And it's common. It happens more frequently than we understand. And so if this information and you being able to talk about it, and recording this today and having other people listen to it, if it helps even one person, I think it's worth it. So
Yes.
thank you to you for being brave and resilient. And I don't know, that you have the information that you have today, and I think that's the case for so many people, that's the whole part of the goal here, I think, today, is to get this information out there so people understand it more. You often are going in blind, and I always say, hurt people, right? People who are abusing are very unwell
Right.
people. And that it takes time to recognize that there's a pattern of maladaptive behavior occurring. And so that can be really difficult. But so to your question, yes, the child maltreatment occurs in 30 to 60% of families where spousal or partner abuse takes place. So in my mind, that's a really high number. More than 15 million children in the US live in homes where domestic violence has happened at least once. And so if you're looking at the United States population of roughly 330 million, and we've got 15 million of those homes with children living in them who have experienced it, I think that's a pretty good sized number. But yes, absolutely, there can be some really detrimental effects for children in these situations.
And let's talk about that, because there's a lot of people who think they need to stay in a marriage for the kids.
Right.
So let's talk about those ramifications for kids in an abusive home situation.
Yeah, and these are things we can treat. There's clinically proven ways we can address these situations. So witnessing or experiencing abuse can definitely cause mental, emotional, physical, social health complications. Some of the physical health complications might be diabetes, obesity, being at higher risk for anxiety and depression. The mental, emotional stuff, they might feel guarded, they might feel fearful, they might have poor self-esteem. Breaking it down into like the school age children. So for younger children, like preschool age, you might see more bedwetting, thumb sucking, increased crying, showing signs of fear, having difficulty falling asleep. There might be stuttering, hiding from people, showing severe separation anxiety from their loved ones. Getting a little bit older, school age children, you might see behaviors such as guilt and blame. They might feel guilt and blame regarding the abuse, so that leads to low self-esteem. It leads to them blaming themselves or feeling they're responsible. They may begin to get poor grades. They may refuse to participate in school activities. You may start to see some behavioral issues in school, what we call psychosomatic symptoms, some more of those physical kind of symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, acid reflux, things like that. With teens, you're going to start to see more fighting, bullying, skipping school, high-risk behaviors such as unprotected sex, drug and alcohol use, trouble making friends, isolating, withdrawing, breaking the law potentially, and anxiety and depression.
Yeah, Kenny still to this day has situational things that, hard to tell if it's the guilt from on my end from putting him in a divorce situation, but I have to believe that getting him out of that situation was the best thing that I could have ever done for him. And here I am, 30 plus, I've been married to a wonderful man for 30 years, and almost 40, 30 or 45 years since or 35 years since I got out of that situation. And I still have struggles. And I think the emotional abuse was far worse, at least in my situation, then the mental abuse was far worse in my situation than the physical abuse, because those scars heal, but the mental stuff, gosh, it's tough. It's a tough one.
It
So
is.
even if you think just because you're not getting punched in the face
Right.
doesn't mean you're not being abused.
Right.
Um,
Trauma changes the brain, Lynn. It
yeah,
changes the brain, and we can rewire the brain, and we can learn to live with these type of symptoms in a different way. So you've taken yourself out of the situation where the physical risk or harm is no longer there, but that does not mean that mentally, emotionally, psychologically, that there are situations where the brain has been wired differently to protect you, right? And so and again, there's lots of clinically proven ways that can help you kind of live with that trauma and to deal with those triggers when they come up. But I think that's an important note. I believe that that exists, absolutely.
yeah. I was mentioning to Lori before we started recording that my Kenny's getting married, and I'm going to have to see this person in my life again, and it's it's triggering. It's tough for me. So
Right, right.
and you did say we didn't have the resources back then. I couldn't agree with you more, because I never once knew of a place that I could call, like a
Mm,
hotline, or
right.
and the once I found out that it was imperative that the police get involved if there was physical abuse, they were little to no help for me back in the 80s. They would tell me to go into sleep in the other bedroom, and don't, they just were literally no help whatsoever.
Wow.
They seemed to, I don't even know what the word was. Maybe I was more emotional than the person who was hurting me.
Yeah.
And so he came off as being more, I I can't even express what it was, but
Yeah.
they never helped me. The police never helped me, and I hope that that's not the situation anymore. I hope that they're much more educated on
Yeah.
domestic violence and domestic abuse, and what that looks like, and how conniving abusers can be. They're very, very good at what they do.
Yeah, I'm sorry that that was your experience. Unfortunately, we do hear those stories sometimes. I do believe that in general, I think our agencies are more well equipped. They are well trained. They cover a range of topics, right? And so I think that a lot of that with mental health situations like domestic violence, I think there's a different approach, a different mindset, additional resources, and absolutely for sure a different kind of training. So yeah, I do hope that that has changed as well.
So if somebody is in need of help, what are some of your recommendations?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, seek support. Talk to somebody, talk with a trusted friend, an adult family member or friend, a mental health professional. Contact the national and local domestic violence resources. They are there for you 24/7 to listen, to help guide. You can also text. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799 7233. You can also text the word START, S-T-A-R-T, to 88788. And you will be immediately connected to a trained professional 24/7 who can help you with this. Again, know that you are not alone, and know that support and help is available. There are people ready 24/7 there to assist you, and just know that you and your children and your loved ones deserve to be treated with respect, and you deserve a healthy and happy life. And so seeking support and reaching out to others can help start that process for you.
Well, and I did notice, because I went on the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and immediately it does pop up that if you're concerned about somebody searching
Yes,
your history, it gives you an out, like immediately, like X out of this, and then
right.
get to a phone and either call or text. So
Yeah,
again,
excellent point.
we will
Yeah,
put all that information in because in our notes, because abusers will nowadays, with the technology we have,
right.
they're checking, they're watching you.
Yeah,
So you have to be very careful. And there
right.
are other resources available too, Lori. So let's share with everybody what those are.
Yeah. So there's the National Domestic Violence Hotline that I talked about, and that website. And just I also want to say that website, they can, or I'm sorry, that resource, they can work with people in over 200 different languages. And so language won't be a factor there. They have interpreters at the ready to support you, whatever language you speak. And that website is the hotline, THEHOTLINE.org. There's also the National Sexual Assault Hotline, which is 1-800-656 4673, and the 4673 is hope, the word hope. And then because we're in Illinois, I kind of came up with some more local resources that are available. There's the Illinois Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is in Springfield. Their phone number is 217-789-2830. And they're available Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, but they also have an Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 1-877-863-6338. And two organizations that we utilize. My practice is in Wakanda, Illinois, so we utilize these organizations and work with them on a regular basis. Turning Point Incorporated, they're in Woodstock. Their phone number is 815-338-8081. Their website is www.turn as in Nancy pt.org. And then WINGS, Women in Need Growing Stronger. So the WINGS program, their phone number is 847-519-7820. They also have a 24-hour domestic violence hotline, and that phone number is 847-221-5680.
And then I think it's really important for us to share that if you really are in immediate danger, call 911.
Yeah.
Get yourself out of this situation. And there are some of these places who will find safe places for you to go right away. So you can get yourself out of those situations. And once again, I will leave all this information in not only the show notes, I do a blog post on my blog, and I will list all the resources that way. If you have any further questions or you need more advice or information, you can contact Lori. All her information will be in the notes. She shared these great links with us. So you will have all that information at the ready. And she also gave me a link to her newsletter, which is something that I subscribe to, which
Nice.
I enjoy reading it, because in the big scheme of things, there's great information along with tips for navigating through this thing we call life, which can get hard for all of us from time to time. So I want to thank you so much, Lori, for joining me and talking about this very important subject. And I'm sure we've talked before, and I will also link to this. And we talked about what it was about depression and the stress of the holidays, which are right around the corner too.
Yes, almost a year ago. Yes, it was November or December of last year, I think, right?
All these tough subjects, but it's important, I think, to have somebody who knows what they're talking about when we talk about things that like our mental health, because it's important, and there are resources and there are people who can help us. And it's been my experience that talking with a professional is, to me, one of the best things I can do for my self-care. So thanks again, Lori. Really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you for having me, and anything I can do to help, always.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Living Large podcast.